You're listening to the Reinvest Podcast, where each Tuesday we show business owners and entrepreneurs how to diversify into real estate by equipping you with the tools and tactics to build generational wealth. Your hosts, Garrett Gatton and Seth Ciminillo. Hey guys, thanks for jumping on to another episode of the Reinvest Podcast, episode 111. At the
111.
I know.
love that.
We're just chucking away, man. And when you do a weekly podcast, every Tuesdays, by the way, you start bankrolling a lot of great content and great guests. And we've said this before. People ask us, hey, what's been one of the biggest outcomes or business drivers of you guys doing the podcast? And undeniably, it has been that we get an hour of reserved time with some of the top real estate professionals, thought leaders, movers and shakers in the industry. And selfishly, we have gained so much from that. And we just get to extend those conversations to you as a listener.
Yeah, you get exposed to so much.
You do.
So much. So that's been pretty cool. It's cool to hear what other people are doing in the industry. It's cool to hear where things are headed in the industry, kind of from a macro level. You know, we're so isolated in Ohio sometimes, or in Northwest, America, Midwest America. And it's just good to hear what's going on all over the country.
It's a big world out there. At the time of this episode, if you're listening to this, we are now a few weeks removed from the presidential election results. So we can all stop killing trees as the mailers will cease, and we can have some resolve on the wildness of the last 2 years.
How many text messages did you receive?
It's funny, my iPhone, they changed it to where they anticipate who they think is getting a hold of you. And maybe Donald Trump texted me probably about 30 or 40 times. So we're pretty close at this point. But I think it's going to be a relevant topic to touch on about the presidential election. And with us today, our guest, Levi Brackman, who is a seasoned entrepreneur, real estate investor, thought leader in psychology, technology, and Jewish wisdom, which, Levi, I love your introduction because it brings so many questions to my mind of who is this man?
Who is this?
Who is Levi? So, Levi, introduce yourself, and thanks for coming on today.
Thank you guys for having me so much. Pleasure to be here. So it's actually pronounced, it's spelled Levi, but my name's actually Levi.
Levi.
That's the Ashkenazic Jewish way of pronouncing Levi is Levi. So most people know me as Levi.
Okay.
Yeah, so Levi Brackman is my name. I guess the best way to describe me is that I don't like to fit into any particular definition. One of my ethos in life is that you've got one life to live. You might as well live as many lifetimes as possible within that one lifetime. I reject the whole notion of having to be one thing based on anyone's, society's, other people's expectations. So that's why, you'll got all these different kind of streams in my life. So what am I is a really difficult, it's not just a difficult question, but it's a complicated question. I think that's for most people, it's kind of complicated. But I think for the benefit of this podcast, I invest in real estate, and I also am the CEO and founder of a company called Invown. Invown, it's made up of two words, invest and own. And it's basically a crowdfunding platform where you have owners of companies and businesses, real estate, and then you have investors, and allows the two to meet. So investors to invest in, companies, real estate deals, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what those are the two things from a financial perspective that I'm involved in.
And just to kind of give some broader context, and this probably, I'm sure, shapes the way that you run your business, but a lot of people don't know this. They can find you on Amazon. You're a published author.
Yeah, well, yes, as opposed to a self-published author. Yes, I co-wrote a book called Jewish Wisdom for Business Success, which was published by a company called Amacom. I think that was then bought out by Penguin. It's available on Amazon. You can buy it, and it's translated into, I think, 7 or 8 languages as well.
Wow.
So
let's back up just a little bit. So that's what you're at today. You are the founder, owner of Invown. You're running that business currently, but how did you even get into real estate, into fintech? How did you get there?
Well, I bought my first house, in which I lived in. And I still own that house, actually. It's in Colorado, although I live in Connecticut. But I bought that, I think, in 2006. So I was maybe 27 years old. So that's late for some people, early for others. But I bought that house, and that was, and then eventually moved and bought another house and kept that one, and realized, hey, this is not a bad deal. You can have an income, and slowly I just kept doing that.
So kind of accidentally started collecting a rental portfolio of single family houses.
Well, I wasn't accidentally. Eventually, it was very intentional.
Yeah.
But when I realized that this was a good business if you can buy them right, and that's key, is buying them right. So if you can buy them right, then it's a really good business.
I think what's wild to me is, owning real estate as a strategy that's available to the general populace is a very Western idea. And you don't realize that until you come in contact with people from other countries who that's not even a calculus. It's not a conversation, a strategy in their financial, scenario. And so we take it for granted that literally anybody can get into real estate investing if you live in the United States. Recognizing that takes down some of the mental barriers that people put up about why they should or can't invest in real estate. So how did you get into the technology side of things from a career perspective?
So where do I start here? I mean, I was doing a PhD in psychology, because I was running a nonprofit organization called Youth Directions.
And this is in Australia?
No, this was in Colorado. So I started a nonprofit back in, I think, 2008 called Youth Directions, and the goal was to help kids who were challenged in life kind of figure out their life, to get their life on track and find what we were calling passion and purpose back then. And we used to have this, youth. We went to schools and second chance schools, which are alternative schools for kids who weren't successful in regular high schools. And we had a little bit of a youth center where these kids would show up, and we had programming for them and a lot of coaching. And eventually built this program which helped kids kind of do some introspection and figure out who they are and make some, long-term goals in their life. And I built a piece of technology around this, which enabled them to do that online on an app. And was trying to get that adopted in schools and other places, and with some success. But people kept asking me for data associated with it, and I said, I don't know. It seems to work, And they said, well, show me some data. So that took me along this path of trying to get data, which ended in me actually joining a PhD program to collect that data on the program that I had built. And along the way, I had to learn how to code in a statistical programming language called R, which a lot of people know it, but perhaps no one in this audience would know exactly what R is.
I know it's a letter in the alphabet. So
it's a letter in the alphabet, but it's also anyone who does stats. Okay. Use this open source language because it's got a lot of really good statistical packages, etc. But you need to learn how to code.
Well, I think what's interesting about the data side of things, and you were running into this, is when you have a tech company, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit, those are the metrics, A, that drive value if you're trying to sell something, or B, if you're trying to get adoption with it, that's all of the backup, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you need the data. And I was like, who wouldn't want to help kids find passion and purpose in life? And they're like, everyone would, but I don't know whether your program works, so show me the data. And actually to get data to show that you've got the outcome that you care for is actually much more complicated than to say, well, how many people are buying my product, right? You want to know, is this moving the needle in these kids' lives? Well, how do I measure that? That's much, much more complicated.
Wow.
So I basically, did a PhD and did a bunch of psychometric analysis, and I built a survey instrument which helped measure purpose in life across the lifespan. And we did one randomized control trial on this program, And anyone who wants to see the PhD can go online, go to Google Scholar, put in my name, and you can download the whole thing and read it. I don't recommend it. It's not bedtime reading, but
unless you're trying to fall asleep or something.
yeah, you definitely, well, yeah, you definitely fall asleep reading it. But that was the studies which I did, and
So what was the
I
outcome of that? What was the outcome of that program? I mean, were you successful in what you had set out to do?
Yes. Yeah, it did exactly what we thought it was supposed to do. So yeah, and it helped increase purpose in life in kids, and it was also in adults, by the way. And it also had the sleeper effect, which means that people who did it, their purpose increased even 3 months after they finished the program. So from time 1 to time 2, their purpose in life increased, and then that's obvious. If you go to a Tony Robbins conference. And at the end of the Tony Robbins conference, they come to you and they put a microphone in your face and say, "How was it?" You're like, "It was awesome." Go and ask them 3 months later, they might say, "Oh shit, that cost me, I don't know, $1,000.
Put that on a credit card." Oh,
yeah. So, so the key thing you're looking for is a sleeper effect. What happens 3 months afterwards? Is that effect still there? And we found that not only was it still there, it was actually increasing. So the purpose in life actually increased even 3 months later. So it was a good program, and it's available for free online. Anyone wants it, purposelife.me, it's there. You can sign up and you can use it. So purposelife.me, I don't make any money out of it. Actually, it costs me money. It's open source. Anyone wants to try and figure this out, it's still available online. That was my PhD. But basically what happened was, as I was going through that PhD, I had learned all these skills. And a friend of mine various things happened with Youth Directions. One of our biggest donors, because it was a nonprofit, ended up having significant financial difficulty and wasn't able to continue funding it. Because of that, a lot of the other funders dropped out. You were asking questions, maybe you skip a little bit about, difficult, challenging circumstances. This was a very challenging circumstance.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of effort on building this program, and the donors kind of dropped out one after the other. Once the biggest donor dropped out, other people just followed suit, and it became very challenging. So one of my friends of mine suggested me for a job at the company he worked in. It was a relatively big company called Travel Report. I got an email that I've been suggested for the job. So I kind of, what the heck, let me apply, and I got the job. So that took me into a technology company, and I started working in doing machine learning and AI. I ended up leading the AI team in that company.
Wow.
I think what's fascinating is when you are out there, so many of us don't understand how the sum adds together to the whole. Mm-hmm. And that's why they say hindsight's 20/20, because you look back on your life and you see, oh man, my pursuit with the youth initiative I did and just trying to make that successful set you up then to come into this technology company and have a foundation then for what you did there. And so I'm always fascinated to see how people's lives kind of daisy chain and culminate into where they are today. But you can't steer a ship that's not moving. And so there's got to be action in your life to create some of that direction. So I'm sorry, continue. You're getting into the port where Invown became an idea from your time there.
What can happen though, just to talk a little bit about this life thing, is what can happen is that if you don't steer the ship, the ship steers you. Mm-hmm. And I ended up spending 4 years in corporate America, and I never wanted to be a corporate America guy, right? I never wanted to work for big companies. I never wanted to have to show up to one-on-ones with a boss and work someone else's agenda. Never wanted to do that. But I got sucked into it. I took this first job. Basically I needed at that point to make a living. My nonprofit had fallen apart more or less, and I needed to make a living, and this seemed to be available, and it was offering a very nice salary, so I took it. Mm-hmm. And I started doing quite well in corporate America. Got double promotion, and then I got headhunted for another company, and then up in another company, and eventually, I'm an executive at a relatively large, publicly traded company. And that all within 4 years. And I'm like, I don't know, what am I doing here? This isn't the life I wanted. This was, yes, it brings in a good salary and you got a good bonus at the end of the year, etc. But that's not what I was looking for. And at that same point of time, I was trying to buy another house that I moved to Connecticut for this job with booking. And I was trying to buy a house there, and I started kind of really thinking about real estate very deeply. Like, well, how does all this work? And I realized that the little homeowner, you guys are real estate agents, all the homeowners who come and buy these homes, they're basically taking, putting 10% or 20% down. And so they've saved up all this money over years. So they've got this kind of stack of cash that they're putting to buy this property. And what are they doing with it? They're putting 20% down, or usually they're putting less than 20% down. So they're paying PMI, private mortgage insurance, which is it's a rip-off of rip-offs. So I don't know. It's like, I don't know how that's legal, right?
Especially since it's mandatory for us to pay it. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So you're going to have to pay private mortgage insurance, right? Plus you got to pay this, interest rate, and you got to pay all these taxes, etc. And then you're basically indebted to the government, because Fannie and Freddie, most of these loans are Fannie and Freddie loans, which is basically the government. So you're indebted now to the government for the next 30 years. So you're basically paying an additional tax for your house to the government, and because the interest is definitely the tax, right? Because the government, what does the government need that additional interest? So I'm not saying you should give interest-free loans. I'm just saying that that's what's happening here. Yeah, it gets bundled up and gets sold to Wall Street, et cetera, et cetera. I get it, but basically it helps the government borrow more money, because they're buying up all these mortgage-backed securities, right? They ended up being bought by the Federal Reserve. But the point I'm trying to make is that the poor little guy, right, is taking all this money, and basically his salary, let's say, is $5,000 a month, right? He's taking, 1,000 of that in interest and giving it back to the government to live in this house, which is the American dream. So when I started looking at it, all the people who've got their fingers in the pie of this housing market, it's just like the little guy gets screwed every single time. He's like taking a bunch of your money and giving it over each month to pay this mortgage. And if you don't pay it, basically you can become homeless. So
right. Not a whole lot of good alternatives. So
right. So I started thinking really deeply about all of this. And so as I realized this, I realized that there is perhaps an alternative way of doing this, which is basically allowing people to co-invest with homeowners in owner-occupied residential real estate, peer-to-peer type of investment. And it's could be not a bad deal, because the homeowner is going to take care of his house, right? There's all kinds of ways of investing in real estate. When you talk about investing in real estate, mostly you're talking about buying a rental property or syndicating, going along with someone else who's buying rental properties and they're getting some of the rental income. But what if you could invest in someone's own home? And they're going to take care of it, and you're going to get some of the upside as there's the natural appreciation of real estate. On average, 3 to 4% a year, in line sometimes higher than inflation. And this could be a good way in which people could invest in real estate and also help out homeowners. So, peers helping peers rather than, so this was an idea that I had, and I started getting really passionate about it, and I decided to quit my corporate job and basically start this business called Invown to help individuals invest in real estate through owner-occupied residential real estate. So I started that, and the government got involved and realized that the government is not they've written a whole bunch of books which are just insane.
You're saying that to create that structure of kind of this peer-to-peer investing in other people's residential homes, the SEC had so much regulation surrounding that it wasn't a feasible idea?
It's not just the SEC. So there's this wonderful law which was signed into law by Obama in 2012 called the Jobs Act. Okay. And the Jobs Act is really supposed to kind of help people invest. It's supposed to allow capital formation to be much easier for small businesses. So in idea, it's an excellent idea. And it works very well in other countries like, New Zealand and England and other places. The problem is that it was a bipartisan bill. If it was just the Republican bill, it would have been a fantastic bill. What happened was, and this is, getting into the election and the fact that now, you got Donald Trump is going to be the president, and you got the Senate controlled by the Republicans. Hopefully the House will be controlled by the Republicans. And by the way, just to be clear that I'm not a partisan politician in politics. I'm not registered as to any party, and neither am I. I voted Democrat in the past. This election, I did not vote Democrat, but I have in the past voted. I voted for Clinton. I voted for Biden. But that said, I voted Trump this time. But the reality is that what happened was that the Democrats got in on this bill and they wrote a bunch of provisions ostensibly supposed to be protecting the investor, but actually that kind of really screwed up the whole bill. Mm-hmm. And people have been trying to figure out how to get around and, do this successfully, despite the fact that the Democrats who had their hands in trying to protect investors in this bill really kind of made the whole bill unworkable. And there are certain provisions which are put in this bill which just make it really hard to do anything innovative. So that's what we were up against in the end. And also with the SEC, which just wasn't willing to play ball with us. And I have to go back. Now, I'll go back and I'll revisit all of this with the SEC at some point, but see if we can now do it again. But there's lobbying efforts. I was in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago, and I with the group lobbying to change the law just to make it a little bit more practical. So,
well, I think so. Laying the groundwork there, and I want to really dive into this concept that has been playing out over the last, I'm just going to say 2 decades, plus or minus, and it's the idea that different industries, excuse me, are being or have been democratized. Democratized meaning they're now open to the wide general populace. And you've seen it in different ways. Most notably, Airbnb democratized the hospitality industry, how you travel and vacation. Uber did that with transport, right? And now you're seeing...
Yeah, even investing in the stock market has become so much more consumer focused and accessible through Robinhood and other, and now other companies have jumped on board and have made it more consumer friendly as well. But
these kind of closed door, private, small room, country club investment vehicles or high barrier to entry markets are now being opened up to, I'm going to call the retail investor or somebody who's making $150,000 or $200,000 in corporate America with 50 grand of disposable income a year. They can play in these spaces. And the question is it good? Is it bad? Right. And so I want to kind of get your thoughts on this trend. What's led to this happening? And then what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can't talk to the historical trends of why it's happening. It's except that, I think everything becomes more and more open over time, right? The internet's opened up everything. There's this massive, opening up of different things. We have access to knowledge, which, just 200 years ago, like no one had access to.
Kind of wild.
Start off with the printing press, so and go up from there. So to what we have today. So this is something which is a trend which has been going on for very, very long time, and this is just a continuation of it. So, and some people would say it's a uniquely postmodern idea, which I don't like that whole concept because postmodernism leads very, very seamlessly into wokeism, which is very problematic for me. But that's a whole different conversation. So, but definitely this democratization of knowledge and then also finances, etc., is a trend which has taken place, ever since the printing presses. Let's put that aside. Well, is it good? Is a question. I think you're asking, is it good? I think that it's a mixed bag, and that is because there are actors out there who will take advantage of any situation that comes their way. And so just, investor beware is what I say. The difference between like the Democrats and the Republicans are that the Democrats say we have to put provisions in the law to protect the investors from themselves and protect them from bad actors. And if the law doesn't protect them, they won't protect themselves and they end up losing a lot of money. And they can't afford to lose the money. Right? So that's really, I think the perspective that perhaps I have is allow the market to govern itself to a large degree, or to as much of it as possible. And I think that it's good, but it's also like investors need to be aware. Like, not every single deal is a deal which you're going to make money on, and not every single player is going to be a player which is going to be trustworthy. So be careful. So as long as you're careful, it's very, very good. But if you're not that careful, you shouldn't be involved with it. So just, and the same thing is with the stock market, by the way. I don't know if anyone played in the stock market, but when I first started putting money in the stock market and I started to lose money, that was very painful, until I said, I got to stop doing this until I really understand and learn it well. So this it should be no difference, but your risk is much, much higher with all these alternatives.
Yeah. And I would agree. And I would add to that, yes, it's a mixed bag in that there are people who will take advantage and are quote unquote offering, and they're selling used goods. They're selling a bag of, just junk investments and packaging it and putting a facade on it. But then there's also just an ignorance level of, there's probably a reason that you haven't invested in an investment opportunity like this, because you weren't at a spot financially to do so. And that doesn't mean that you just lacked money, but it also meant that you lacked the knowledge to even understand how it functions and how can you make money and how can you lose money. What are the risk profile associated with it, right? Just because I have the money, somebody told me the other day, just because I can afford to buy a Ferrari doesn't mean I can afford to own a Ferrari. And there's a big difference, right? I can go to the dealership, they'll give me the loan. If I have the money saved up, I can drive off that lot with a Ferrari. But can I afford to take it to the shop when it needs, new rotors and brake pads? Or what happens when someone hits me in a bumper to bumper, and now I got to take it to a specialized, mechanic to do a touch-up job, right? All of those costs associated with the ongoing nature of that investment. I think there's a general uneducated nature, and that's why, to your point, investor beware. There's just a natural progression in all of us in terms of our ability and our sophistication level to grow. It's why a lot of people start in single family housing, because it's knowable. The variables are controlled. It's relatively stable, and not as complex as some of these other investment strategies.
What I've seen is that as things have become easily accessible through technology, and really, I think technology has been the big catalyst, like what you were saying, of this, as we've it's just opened up so much. And as things have become more and more democratized, it's never been easier to invest ignorantly in whatever field that is, because people can download an app, and whether it's the stock market, a crypto exchange, real estate software, there's kind of several of them out there where you could invest, into fractional real estate investments. And you could quite literally put in your information, connect your bank account, and invest with knowing absolutely nothing. And it's like gambling for people. You know what I mean? And it's never been easier for people to, be duped by the crypto stuff. And just because people there's so much hype around these things, people don't understand it. And so they're investing in something that they actually don't have any knowledge base in. And then they wonder why they lose money. And it turns out education is actually really important. So it's just, it's so interesting. So buyer beware. Investor beware, be educated in the areas that you want to pursue in your investment. Just because it's easy to do does not mean you should do it.
There's a proverb in the Bible, and I just read it a couple weeks ago. I've been trying to do a chapter a day, and it said that essentially the effective is you have desire, but you lack knowledge, and therefore you fail. And many people have the desire, that impulse, that, the want, but that in of itself is only a partial picture or a part of the equation to find success. And you have to have that knowledge. And knowledge is not just information, but it's an interpretation and an understanding of that knowledge, not just facts that are, spit out to you. I watched a YouTube video. I know how this works.
Like IRR is a really good example of it, right? So a lot of people will say, hey, what's the IRR? Oh, it's a 25% IRR. That's amazing. Right? And it sounds great, right? That means internal rate of return. That means I put in $100,000, $25,000 a year. That's amazing, right? But that's not what it means, and what all the assumptions associated with the IRR, et cetera, et cetera. So, you just need to be just need to be really, really careful to understand the metrics and then also the fundamentals behind the metrics, and then who is doing this offering, who are the people.
Yeah.
Should only accredited investors be allowed to invest in private real estate investments?
No, I think anyone should be allowed to. And that's just what Invown does, is it allows anyone to invest through Reg CF, regulation crowdfunding. So everyone should be allowed to invest in it. I don't think the government should tell people you have to have a financial, you need to have a certain, only rich people can invest in these things. So I don't believe in the nanny state, but I do believe in making sure the individual has to take responsibility for themselves and what they do. And if you're putting your money on the line, even, for some people, $500 is a lot of money. For some people, $10,000 is a lot of money. Some people, it's $100,000. It just depends. Whatever is equivalent to a lot of money for you, you're putting it on the line. You just need to make sure that you're investing that prudently and make sure you understand what you're doing before you do it. And it's the same thing for any kind of investment. They say, what's an investment that doesn't have any return? What's it called?
A bad investment.
A donation,
That was just undone. That's good.
Just want to make sure that you're investing and not donating, right? So that's it's really important. You don't get a tax deduction for this kind of donation if you don't make a return. Right. So maybe you can write it off if it's a loss. But the point is that just be careful. And as long as you're careful and you're prudent with your money, there's a lot of opportunities out there to invest in really solid assets.
I want to summarize what we've been talking about as we transition into our show segments. So first of all, technology, there have been things playing out for centuries in increments of how things have been opened up. Just because things are more open now than ever before doesn't automatically assume that it's good for you. And there is an onus on the investor, whether they're active or passive, that they need to understand the risk profile associated with that. And we touched on it, but I would add to this, with so much information out there, you have to be good at discerning through bad information and good information that's not for you and good information that is for you. And emotion is one of the silent killers of any investor. And you have to be able to have mechanisms in place that are checks and balances for you to not be caught up in emotion. Some of those things are being a part of some kind of a mastermind. There's investment groups out there that they're just a think tank. They're peer-to-peer, and they share investment strategies that you can go before and have that quote-unquote council of many people and pitch those ideas. There's a time delay. If I'm going to invest a certain amount of money, I'm going to wait 72 hours a week in order to think and process this instead of that impulse reaction. So there's mechanisms you can put in place as an investor that keep you from making these emotional decisions. So I think and then the last thing is ownership. It's every aspect of your life, if you want to grow, comes from ownership. Investing, relationships, your physical health, your mental health, your career growth. So that it's not a new thing. It's the fundamentals of how to be a healthy individual that grows. And that's what's going to set you up for success in investing. Levi, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on 100%. It's to this day, and just to jump into the mastermind thing, for example, some of these masterminds are really expensive, and not all of them are what they're cracked up to be. So be careful. These masterminds too. You don't need the mastermind. There's a friend of mine who we co-underwrite stuff together. I don't show him his underwriting. I show him sometimes we do deals together, sometimes not. But the fact is, have somebody else who understands this take a look at it as well. So if you're looking to invest, whatever is a significant amount of money for you, right? There are other people out there who also might want to invest as well, and become friends with those people. And then jump on a call once a week with them and just say, hey, what deals do we have? What have you found? I'll show you what I have. You show me what you have. Talk them through together, because 4 eyes are better than 2 on a deal. And start doing that, getting used to doing it. And the 72-hour rule, by the way, that's a great, love that idea. But
my wife,
also,
she's good at that kind of stuff.
Jump in with other people, right? Find a friend. Don't do it together. Don't do it alone. Do it with a friend. who also is interested in investing, and he'll bring you deals sometimes. He'll say, "Hey, did you see this one? Oh, this is a good one." You'll critique each other. You'll both become wealthier together.
So let me ask this real quick before we move on. For Invown specifically, we were kind of talked about some of the rules and regulations that you've been up against with the SEC and some of the different laws that maybe affect how group investing would work. How much vetting or regulation do you have to put in within Invown, your platform, to like make sure bad actors are not jumping on your platform and trying to scam people with raising money for something that's illegitimate?
So we will do an in-depth interview with the sponsor or the founder. We'll do a background check on them. We'll look through their offering documents, but we don't make any representation that this is a good deal. But we do check for fraud. Right. So I'll give you an example. We got a guy who showed up and wanted to do an offering on the platform, and when I did a little bit of a deep dive into him, I found that there was stuff online which indicated that he may have been part of some kind of fraud. He wasn't convicted of anything, and there wasn't any. He didn't have anything which, but there was red flags. Right. And I told him, I'm sorry that we won't have that offering. So in other words, we're pretty careful. In life, all you have is your reputation. I think that your reputation is the hardest thing to have, to build, and the easiest thing to lose. So, our reputation is very important to us. That doesn't mean that I guarantee that you're going to make money on things that are invested in the platform. We don't say that at all. But we're careful to make sure that we don't bring on nefarious actors. There are some people who have good deals, and the deals just go south. That happens in business, and people will lose money. It's just part of business. Some of your investments just won't pan out. It's a fact.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean there's fraud there, right? It just means that things didn't work out.
Yep.
What we avoid as much as possible are people, those bad actors who we think might be trying to perpetrate some kind of fraud on people. So we're very, very careful to weed that out.
Gotcha. Okay. That's great. We're going to jump into our Smaller Pockets segment. So, Levi, go ahead and tell us about your Smaller Pockets story. What was something that went wrong with either a real estate investment or within your business? What happened, and then what did you learn from it?
So this is particular where I lost some money?
Preferably, yeah. Let's hear a good story.
I'm very, very careful in my underwriting. So as far as real estate is concerned, as of now, thank God, I haven't lost any money in many of my real estate deals. There have been some deals that I've looked at and I've come close to doing and pulled back from because I thought that this might go bad. Like real estate in particular, anyone out there investing in real estate, you have to understand that once you own that deal, if you've bought someone else's problem child property, that becomes your problem child property.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just like a friend of mine said to me, there's no obligation in the Bible. There's no command in the Bible which says thou shalt buy real estate. God doesn't tell you need to buy real estate. So just you buy it at your own, because you've chosen to, and then you're going to take on all the responsibility of whatever happens as a result of that decision. So just be very, very careful. I mean, incredibly careful before I pull the trigger on buying any kind of real estate. So I do my due diligence really, really well, underwrite it properly 5-6 times. I have other people looking at underwriting to make sure I'm doing right. So thank God in real estate, I've had horror stories, but I've never lost money so far. But, go back to the situation with which I was talking about earlier, which was with youth directions. I consider that to be a considerable failure in my life. I honestly do. Because I really wanted to build an organization, a nonprofit organization, which would have an international reach. And it did to a certain degree, but not the way I wanted it to, which would help kids and people in their lives really kind of figure out purpose in life. I dedicated 14, 15 years of my life to that.
Wow.
I actually wrote a PhD on it, right? So in other words,
wow,
which makes one's once you got a PhD, you're considered a world expert on it. And so technically I'm a world expert in purpose in life. But it never panned out the way I wanted it to pan out. And part of that was because I had one donor who was a good friend of mine, and I had most of my eggs in that basket from a financial perspective. And he was writing out pretty large checks. We're building up other donors on the side, other foundations and others started to chip in. They want to see a track record. And once they see a track record, they start, I'll give $5,000 next. They'll give $10,000, and then bigger foundations will come on board, etc. And slowly you're able to kind of build out this solid thing. But if that main person drops by the wayside at the wrong time, before you've built that snowball, you can lose everything entirely. And that's what happened basically to me at that point. So he had financial difficulties, this individual. He was very, very wealthy. And he had some issues where he made an investment in an area which he wasn't his expertise fully. He put in a huge amount of money, and something went wrong in that investment, and he started to hemorrhage cash like crazy. He probably could have still continued to, and this was another mistake I made. Like I said, I feel bad for you, and I didn't kind of pull the guilt trip on him to continue supporting us.
Yeah.
Which I probably should have, because he helped. He was one of the founders. In other words, it wasn't just me. I was the guy putting in the work, but he was like the silent founder, giving in all that money. And then he got scared. He saw he was hemorrhaging money, and he got scared, and he pulled back from a lot of things that he was doing. But he didn't sell his vacation home. He didn't sell his boat. He just stopped giving money to the nonprofit, which he founded together with me. And I probably should have said, "Hey, dude, this isn't right."
Yeah.
But I didn't. I was very nice about it. And I took one for the team.
Man. What do you feel was the lesson from that for you?
I know. I'm just like, there's a lot there.
Yeah. What do you feel you walked away from that at this point of your, now you have hindsight, right? You have the benefit of time passing, being able to look back from that. It's led into some different areas, and it's led into your current career. But at the time, what do you feel like you were learning?
Some people say, I've heard people say it, the people have gone into a big accident or whatever, and they, God forbid, they lose their legs, and they say, that's the best thing that ever happened to me, because looking back in hindsight, and I don't say that. In other words, when I look back, I say, that wasn't a good thing. And have I grown from it, become a better person from it? I don't know. I wanted that to be really successful. And the fact that it wasn't actually is something which I regret till this day. I wish it was different. And I don't think it was a good thing that it wasn't successful.
Here's the question then, maybe to reframe that. If you could do it over again, go back to that, knowing what you know now, what would you change?
Yeah, I would have given him a really big guilt trip. I would have said, dude, you started this with me, before you stop giving money to your nonprofit, sell your vacation home, stop flying private
caused
jets,
him to evaluate his priorities and held some accountability there. Man, that's
did that
huge.
Damage that relationship?
Well, not in the short term, but eventually that we're no longer connected, myself and this, but that's a different thing. But it wasn't because we fell out. It was, we won't go into that details. But the point is that I should have held him accountable. I should have held him accountable.
Yeah, that's really, it's hard though. You're a friend, you're really close. That relationship sometimes can kind of maybe cloud the business or the nonprofit, aspect of
I
that
knew
as well.
what he was going through, dude. He was hemorrhaging cash.
Yeah.
And
you almost know too much.
I knew how hard it was for him, and therefore I had compassion towards him for that.
Yeah.
And it may have been misplaced compassion. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't know. Would I have done it differently? I don't. I'm the same person, so I have compassion for people. So, but I don't say that. I don't say look back and say wow, that I learned from that, and
there's not a pretty ribbon to tie around that one. Yeah,
there isn't, and that's the smaller pockets. There isn't. People's lives change, and sometimes outside events can impact one in a very significant way.
So this is going to be a good segue into what we call our little nugget. So Levi, and now I'm gonna prod here a little bit. So you've authored a book on, lessons from, let me read the title here so I don't butcher this. Jewish Wisdom for Business Success. Okay. Give us some Jewish wisdom about business success. I feel like that's relevant for our little nugget.
So I think the best piece of wisdom, which I start the book with it, is the idea of face your fear, right? Because basically what happens is, in life, is that one's really scared to actually, you want to live your best life. We all do. Most people do. But how do you do it? Like, it feels insurmountable.
Yeah.
So the story is, Exodus of Egypt. I know you've heard of it. I'm sure you've read it in the Bible, Exodus. I don't know whether all your listeners would know it, but basically the Israelites are slaves in Egypt, and there's the 12 plagues which God brings upon the Egyptians.
By the way, we're not talking about the Christian Bale reenactment through Hollywood a few years ago.
No. What actually says in the Bible, right? So you have the 12 plagues which God brings upon the Egyptians and upon Pharaoh, and eventually he lets them free, and there's a big exodus, and they leave Egypt. And what's the first thing that happens? The first thing that happens is they hit the Sea of Reeds, right? And the Egyptian army decides Pharaoh has a change of heart, and he sends his army to bring them back. And they're caught between, the Sea of Reeds and the Egyptian army, which is advancing. So what do? They're stuck. Right. So, God,
the proverbial between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, literally. And Moses looks to God and says, "What should I do?" And he says, "Travel forward, continue going forward." And they go into the sea. And the first guy jumps in. His name was Nachshon. He jumps in, and the water, according to the extra textual kind of tradition, water came up to his nostrils. He was about to drown, and God tells Moses to pick up your staff over the water, and everyone knows what happened. The sea split. Right. So I don't know whether this happened or not, and it's a real story that actually occurred or not. But the story is amazing, because anyone who wants to start a business, right? You start off, you're a slave to your job or whatever you're doing. You're slaves, and you want to get out of this, and eventually you throw off the pharaohs, and you're like, wow, I'm free. I heard Elon Musk say this. That they asked Elon Musk, how can people become more like you? And Elon said, first of all, it's not that fun being me. Second of all, he said, you start a new business, it's fun for the first 3 months, and then it gets really hard, right? And so you need a really, really high pain tolerance. And this is kind of a truism, a piece of what really happens in real life. So you got your job, and you throw off the yokes of your pharaoh, of your boss. No more one-on-ones with your boss, etc. You're starting your own business, and it's really exciting for the first 2 months. And then you hit the Sea of Reeds. It becomes really hard, right? And you feel like you're drowning, and you can look back and you can say, well, why was this really worth it? And as a matter of fact, there is this midrash, like this traditional explanation about what happened here. There were actually 4 views which the Israelites had about what to do when they had the Egyptian army advancing and you had the Sea of Reeds in front of them. One of the views, well, let's just go back to Egypt, dude. Like, we tried. It wasn't that bad. Let's just go back to Egypt. We were slaves. Right. We know what that is. We can go back there. Another one said, let's just commit suicide. We're not going to go to Egypt. We're not going back there. Never do that. But, at least we died at our own hands. Another one said, let's just pray to God, right? And God will help us. And then the fourth one was, what was the fourth view? Will come to me. But the point is, God said none of those are right. The right answer is you continue marching forward, and then miracles happen. And that is really life, right? You just continue moving forward. If you have conviction in where you're going, continue moving forward. The obstacles, which seemed like they're obstacles, will all of a sudden evaporate. There'll no longer be obstacles. So I think that face your fear and move forward, right? Don't allow the fear to be an obstacle for you. And when you move through that fear, right, that's when the miracles occur. And I think this is like true in life, like in everything which you do.
Yeah.
This is how it works. This is really, really how life works. But you can't sit back either. You know, some people like they get scared and they freeze. You can't freeze. You have to continue moving. Right, continue moving.
I was watching Band of Brothers, which is an HBO series. It's been out for like a decade, and I'm maybe even 2. I'm always the guy that's like, hey, have you guys seen Band of Brothers? Like, you mean that came out like 2010? I'm like, yeah, I'm seeing it for the first time because I live under a cultural rock. But it's really good. And from a war perspective, the best insurance that you had as a soldier to keep from dying is to constantly keep moving. And the moment you stopped, you became a target and you got picked off. And I love that action, that idea of movement and action and forward progress. The only way is forward. And there's a lot of leadership guys that have kind of rehashed that in their own way because it is a fundamental principle of being successful. So awesome. That was a great correlation. I love that. In closing, excuse me, what's been one of the best resources for your business development?
Best resources for my business development. I think that it's other people. I really think it's other people, leaning on other people's expertise and being inspired by others, asking questions. I was just hanging out. We had a watch party, for the election. And I was hanging out with someone, I'm talking to him about his business, et cetera. And he's like, oh, I'm selling this or that. I'm like, why are you selling that? What does he know that I don't know?
Right.
And I started, quizzing him, so what are you going to do with it when you sold it? I don't know everything. We can't. There's so much we don't know. We're just following ourselves all day, which is just a very limited vantage point, right? All I see is what goes in front of my own 2 eyes. You've got 2 eyes, he's got 2 eyes, everyone else has got 2 eyes. If I can lean on those other people's eyes as well and get their knowledge, I'm going to be so much better off. So I think the best resources I've had in my business development is other people. Talk to other people, ask them questions, listen to podcasts, gain insight. And that will help you know what's going on out there based on, other people. And make yourself a few friends who you can rely on and trust. And I have that, and run things by them, and I think that's the best resources. I mean, I could talk about technologies I use, etc., but I just don't think they're as powerful as having people.
Well, even
you can't replace people.
Yeah, even at the core of a technology is a person who had that idea, and wanted to share that.
Yep.
How can people find out more about you and follow your success?
Well, hopefully the success will be there for people to follow. But I think the most successful people, though, for me, success is very private. It's when I go to sleep at night and I feel good about the day I had.
That's good, man.
That's success. So I don't know about following my success. But
you got like a camera that's watching your bedroom or something that people can tune in on.
Well, it's in your heart, right? It's how you feel. Your success is not measured by other people's judgment of it. It's how you feel about yourself and what you're doing and how you show up in the world. That's how I feel, at least. But I'm on Invown.com. I've got a website, Levi Brackman or LeviBrackman.com. Podcast, Truths, Jewish Wisdom for Today. If you're interested in Bible, it's very textual. It's like, it might not be that interesting for most people. It doesn't.
If you liked the little nugget and you want more of that, go check out his podcast.
I try to do that. I try to bring the truth behind the text, what I call the truth. In other words, those things which are constantly truisms, which are found in the text, rather than, but it's very, you're going to have to kind of put up with actually reading the text in a critical way, which is not that interesting. It's not as sexy as it sounds.
Well, awesome, man. Levi, thank you so much for coming on and, kind of breaking down what you guys are doing at Invown, how that ties into what we're seeing kind of on a cultural level, and then just all the experience too. What I love about you and even the honesty of that is, sometimes there's not a pretty bow on things, and we're working through and wading through just the life that comes at us. But really, your little nugget is a great summary to that whole thing, and it's keep moving forward and facing that fear. If I could summarize that. So thank you so much, and we appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you for having me.
As always, excited that you joined us for another episode of the Reinvest Podcast. If you want to learn how you can use your hard-earned capital to diversify into real estate, go to our website, reinvestcapital.us, and shoot us a message. Move farther, reach higher, and grow deeper.